Be'ezrat Hashem, Na'aseh v'natzliach. I want to welcome you to another session of Torah Nuggets. This week's parasha is Parashat Toldot, and we're going to dedicate this class to this Divrei Torah to the bracha v'atzlacha of Inbal bat Jacqueline, bat Chen bat Jacqueline, for the refuah shelema of Mimorati Jacqueline bat Alia, as well as for Hami Avraham ben Zohar. This week's parasha, on a pshat level, is very confusing, but if we go according to the pshat, remez, drash, and sod part of it, as we know, the Torah can be learned in 4 different ways. If we go according to the sod, according to the Gilgulim, we can see a completely different story that emerges from the Pesukim. It starts off with the birth of Esav and Yaakov. And it says in Onkelos, Vayi Esav ish, vehava Esav gevar nachash yarchan. That Esav, when he was born, he had a snake tattoo, nachash yarchan, on his thigh. And a few pesukim later, we see something interesting, something that we don't expect from the patriarchs and matriarchs. Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav kitzayit befiv. We see that Yitzchak has a favorite, and he loves Esav. Verivka ohevet et Yaakov, and Rivka loves Yaakov. Something very uncharacteristic, like of our patriarchs and matriarchs. We don't feel that a lesson learned from our avot ve'imahot is to take favorites, or to choose a son and make him your favorite. So on a pshat level, this pasuk should bother us. Later on in the parasha, when Yitzchak begins to give the blessings of the firstborn to Yaakov instead of Esav, even there it's misunderstood, as we see that Rivka was very adamant about Yaakov getting the blessings and not Esav, and the whole idea started, it all seems very clouded and all very unclear, until you come to the way of the Sod, by way of the Gilgulim, and it shines a completely different light on the whole story. And this is incredible. It says in Michtaveh Arizal, by way of Sod, that Yaakov Avinu, hu Gilgulo v'tikuno shel Adam HaRishon. That actually what's happening over here in this week's parasha is a rectification for the original sin. We know that Adam and Chava sinned because of the snake. The snake tricked Chava into eating from the tree, Etz Hadat Tovera, and in return, Adam ate as well. And from that moment, death came into this world. From that moment, they got kicked out of Gan Eden, and the rectification for that sin started with the Avot. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov all did their share. We're only going to zoom into the part of Yaakov and Rivka and Esav. Yaakov, Rivka, and Esav. Because Yaakov, Rivka, and Esav in this week's parasha are really, Yaakov is Adam, Rivka is Chava, and Esav is the snake. As it says in Adam HaRishon, and here we see that the rectification of the original sin begins in this week's parasha. Yaakov Avinu Gilgulo v'tikuno shel Adam HaRishon. Yaakov Avinu, he is the reincarnation and the rectification of Adam HaRishon. Ve'Rivka imo, and Rivka, his mother, is the reincarnation of Chava. Very interesting that Adam and Chava are not husband and wife in this week's parasha, but rather they're mother and son. And it's explained that Adam HaRishon listened to the voice of his wife and ate from Etz Hadat, like a way a child listens or heeds to a mother's words. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought Adam HaRishon as a Gilgul in Yaakov, and Chava, who is his mother, becomes reincarnated in Rivka. And just like Adam HaRishon listened to Chava like a son that listens to his mother, that's why this week's parasha, Yaakov listens to Rivka, who is his mother. And this is the Tikkun for listening to her in a negative way, in Chet Adam HaRishon, to rectifying it in a good way in this week's parasha. As a matter of fact, it says that Rivka gave birth to 2 children. Ha'echad Esav. Esav came Esav represents the Zohamat HaNachash Shetil B'Chava. So Esav represents the primordial snake, the Samech Mem, the Yetzer Hara, that, as it says, he put the impurity, the Zohamat HaNachash, with Chava. Vasheni, and the other son is Yaakov, comes from Bechinat Hatov Shaya Be'ekvo Shel Adam Harishon. He was the best part of Adam Harishon that came from his heel. So we see that Esav represents the Nachash and Yaakov represents Adam. So even the children right now are starting to take a role. As we know in Sefer Bereshit, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cursed the Nachash. It says the pasuk, Ve'eva ashid bencha uven isha. There's going to be animosity between you and the woman. And that's why Rivka can't stand Esav. That's why it says Rivka, sonet et Esav. Why? Because he represents the Nachash. Remember, the Nachash in the previous lifetime is what caused her to make the biggest mistake, the original sin. So she can't stand Esav, sonet et Esav. Why? Because he represents the snake in this lifetime. Shehechti ota begilgul hakodem. He's the one that made her sin in a previous reincarnation. Ve'ohevet et Yaakov, but she does love Yaakov. Why? Because he's her husband from a previous reincarnation. Yaakov is Adam Harishon, so she loves him because he represents the husband, which was Adam. Now we see that Chava is Rivka, and Yaakov is Adam, and Esav is the snake. Now we can start to understand a little bit better what happened over there in Yitzchak's blessings. It says that in the time of Bereshit, that Chava, because of Chava, Adam Harishon received a curse. Chava caused Adam Harishon to be cursed. In order to rectify that, she's making a tremendous effort in this week's Parashat that Yaakov, who is Adam, gets a blessing to reverse the curse from the beginning of time and reverse it into a blessing in this week's parasha. And that's why it says, שקיבל אדם הראשון כללה, לכן רבקה משתדלת כעת כיעקב שיקבל את הברכות. Because she was the source of his curse as Adam Harishon, she's making a tremendous effort that right now Yaakov received the blessings. And that's why she had all this involvement prior to the blessing of Yitzchak. That's why also in this week's parashat, there's something very interesting. It says, Alai kelaltecha beni. She says, your curse is upon me. Should your father find any wrong in my actions? Meaning what? Alai kelaltecha beni. Alai. She's now admitting it's because of me. Because of me, alai kelaltecha. Because of me, you got cursed. Because in the previous reincarnation, I'm the one that caused you to sin. But now you have to come back and be Beni. You have to be my son in order for me to rectify what I did for you in the previous Gilgul. And then so why she asks him, Shema Bekoli. So he says, Shema Bekoli. So the Chazal want to say, is something that excludes. It's like, meaning, is, because of this, listen to me. Meaning what? Before you listened to my voice and you sinned and you got cursed. Now listen to my voice again. It's my turn to rectify, and not only that, by listening to me this time, you'll also get a blessing. So we see that she's trying to undo the mistake of the original sin. And not only that, it says, in a previous reincarnation, I took food, I took the from the tree of knowledge, good and bad, and I gave it to you, and because of that was a curse. Now take the food to your father and go get a blessing. Everything is getting reversed. Everything is getting undone in this week's parasha. Something that's very interesting, past this week's parasha, when Yaakov actually later on gets married, something very strange that you would say that is very strange to the pasuk that we read, that when he's married, he took two wives, Rachel and Leah, and once again we see that Rachel was ahuva and Leah was snu'ah. Why was Rachel the beloved one and Leah was the hated one? And once again, it's like almost like echoes this week's pasuk, how Esav was loved by Yitzchak and hated by his mother. we have this whole dichotomy between the two brothers, and it comes back again with the wives of Yaakov. Well, if Yaakov is the Tikkun of Adam HaRishon, there's an additional Tikkun that the Arizal reveals to us. Incredible. It says, in the beginning of time, Adam HaRishon had two wives, two Havot. It says the first one was called, when the Pasuk says, Zachar u'nekeva bera'am, that the time that Kadosh Baruch Hu created Zachar u'nekeva, that was the first Chava. She's also known as the wife of the Samech Mem, the Lamed Yud and Lamed Yud and Tav. We try to not to say her name, but that was the first Chava, and that first Chava ran away from Adam Rishon. In previous classes, we said she wanted to be his equal. She says, we're the same age, we're the same height, we're the same weight. Why do I have to be so submissive to you? And we know that everybody has a role, that the man is the influencer and the woman is the vessel. She wanted to be this, you can't have two influencers. Everybody has to play their role. So since she was clashing with Adam Arishon on his role, what happened? She ran away. She says, this relationship doesn't work out for me. And she ended up becoming the mother of all the demons, the mother of all the bad spirits. And then Hashem had to create a second Chava. And now you can actually see this in the other Pesukim. ויקח אחת מצלעותיו, זו חווה ראשונה, ויסגור בשר תחתנה, שהקים החטא במקומה. The Zohar brings that the first one was חווה ראשונה, ויקח אחת מצלעותיו, he took one of his ribs, ויסגור בשר תחתנה, and when he closed his flesh, שהקים החטא במקומה, that he created a second חווה. And that's why when Adam says, זאת הפעם, that's why he said, this one now, that's the flesh of my flesh, the bone of my bones, meaning this one is different from the other one. So we see that there were two Chavot. One that was the first Chava that ran away and became Lamed Yud and Tav, and the second one is the Chava that we know. Later on, Yaakov Avinu, being that he is the Tikkun of Adam Rishon, took two wives, Leah and Rachel, keneged the first Chava and the second Chava. And the first Chava, she was the hated one because she left. And the second Chava is the beloved one that stayed with him. And that's why we see that the Tikkun of Adam HaRishon, even Yaakov, which is Yaakov, continued with his two wives, Rachel and Leah. Nevertheless, we'll leave it off on a good note. Leah did a very good job at doing a tikkun as the first Chava, because just like he said, just like Adam Rishon said, Zot hapam, etzem ha'atzamai b'asem say, Zot hapam. This one now, later on the Pesukim, strengthened that she was also able to do a tikkun, because it says, hapam, when she gave birth to Levi, הפעם ילווה אישי אליי, הפעם יזבלני אישי, הפעם אודה להשם. Every time that she gave birth, she would say, הפעם, to show that the first time, בפעם הראשונה שדחה אותה אדם הראשון, וכעת ילווה עליה. And the first time Adam Rishon rejected her, but הפעם, this time, he will escort her and she fulfilled her ultimate tikkun. Unbelievable to think that, that when we read the Pesukim, everything is so unclear and unfair, but you just go to the ways of the Sod and you realize that everything that was wrong is being rectified, and everything that we think was, didn't make sense in this week's parasha. When you just go to the Sod part of our Torah, you go to the Arizal, you go to Torah Gilgulim, and it's as if they removed the curtain and you see the story behind the story. Shabbat Shalom.